Thank you for participating or attending this important roundtable. The roundtable is learning from others why it's worthwhile to compare ethical approaches across disciplines. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative Collegiate Program at UCCS or myself, I'd like to introduce myself as Tracy Gonzalez-Padron, the director of the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative at Collegiate Program at UCCS College of Business, and a professor at the College of Business. So we really are excited to be able to have a presenter that I think that you will really, really enjoy. Dan Olson is an ethics fellow from the College of the School of Public Affairs at UCCS and a criminal justice instructor. But more importantly, he received his bachelor's degree in business administration from Michigan State University, my alma mater. So also a JD from Thomas Cooley Law School. Dan served as judge advocate in the United States Air Force for over 20 years before retiring in 2017.
All right. We ready to get going here and fire up on this Friday afternoon? All right.
Yes.
Well, all right. Well, there's one. I know many of you are eating lunch, and that is wonderful, and maybe driving and enjoying this beautiful day. So thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us this afternoon talking about comparing ethical approaches across different professions or different disciplines. Now, I'm going to go ahead and fire up these slides here. If you've participated in some of these roundtables before, you might know that generally an ethics fellow at UCCS will do some kind of project, and then we'll do a roundtable to talk about that project. We're going in a little bit reverse order here because my ethics project for the year will actually take place, shameless plug here, on March 9th, Tuesday, from 4:30 to about 6:30. And what I'm going to do for my ethics project this year is I'm going to bring together a group of folks from different backgrounds, and we're going to talk ethics. And so I've got a practicing physician who's also a business owner. I've got a recent criminal justice graduate who now works at the DMV doing criminal justice, and a business perspective, which is myself, unless I find a volunteer out there. And what's going to happen? Each perspective is going to share their basic ethical approach. So medical ethics, CJ ethics, and business ethics. And then together, I'm going to share some ethical dilemmas. And we are going to roundtable that in a presentation just like this, and we're going to see what happens. In other words, we're going to see if the doctor comes to a different ethical conclusion than the criminal justice professional. And if they come to a different conclusion, then business ethics might lead us. And so I'm hoping for an informal panel with lots of questions from the audience, lots of interaction, and lots of just discussion. And my hypothesis is that for some of the ethical dilemmas, we should get different outcomes as to what's ethical. But it could be really fun, and I hope you'll perhaps join us. It's going to be an informal discussion. And so what I'm hoping to do is compare ethical approaches across disciplines. Now, where did I get this idea? Well, my first semester here, I was at the chancellor's welcome for new faculty, and I met a wonderful professor in counseling. And we agreed that we would guest lecture in each other's ethics class. And so she taught medical ethics, I teach ethics in criminal justice. And so she came to my class and gave this amazing presentation about ethics for counselors, therapists, psychotherapists, psychologists. And she gave this example where someone came to her for treatment and said, you know what, doctor, I'm feeling real bad because I've got this body buried in my backyard and it's weighing heavily on me. And my CJ students were going, oh, you got to call the police. And she was explaining how she had to think about the relationship between her and her client and didn't want to destroy that, and how medical ethics do no harm to your patient. And we had this great discussion about this and many other dilemmas. And I saw this great dichotomy between medical ethics and criminal justice professionals. And that really got me thinking. And even during my last semester at the Air Force Academy, I was teaching business law. And I do see some Academy alum out there. Thank you for joining us. But I was teaching business law. And when I teach business law, I have a hearty ethical component. And I thought it'd be cool to bring in somebody from industry. So I found a great speaker from Lockheed Martin. And he came in and taught business ethics. And it was pretty different, quite different from military ethics and military ethos. And we had another great discussion. And so that got me to thinking about maybe I should make this part of my class. Maybe I should continue to explore, different approaches in different career fields. And it really got me to thinking about, I teach in the criminal justice, criminal justice program, and I teach ethics in criminal justice. And many of our students aspire to be police officers, prosecutors, Homeland Security departments. They aspire to do Secret Service, CIA. And it really got me thinking about, and particularly the law enforcement. A good number of our students very much want to serve as police officers. And it got me thinking about all the different people that police officers encounter in their daily life. Perhaps they've got to go visit the hospital to get a blood sample, or to get medical records, or to get an autopsy report. Perhaps they're investigating a white-collar crime and they've got to go see an accountant and get corporate records. Perhaps they're dealing with engineers, scientists, and computer scientists as we extract data from a cell phone. Certainly, our criminal justice professionals, our graduates, have got to work with lawyers, to include prosecutors, judges, and defense counsel. And I do see some defense attorneys out there too. Thank you for joining us. And of course, we've got to, police need to deal with industry, with businesses. If a crime happens at a business, maybe we've got to go deal with professionals in that business. And it really strikes me that all of these professions have very different ethical traditions common. In fact, many of them have their own ethical codes. And they're not always what my CJ majors might expect. And so a few examples here. I'm sure you've all heard medical ethics: do no harm, do good, respect the patient, justice, right? Who gets the ventilator? I've got one ventilator, but 5 people. Who gets it? And so this code of ethics is actually one of our oldest, goes back about 2,000 years. And so the guest speaker in my ethics class did a phenomenal presentation on this. And I found out this is quite a bit different than what my CJ majors have in mind as their ethical approach. So CJ majors, just a little background. I always like to do a little poll for my students and find out what they're thinking. There's a lot of utilitarians. Greatest good for the greatest number, that's the ethical thing. Got a lot of criminal justice majors who think that way. Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill, greatest good, greatest number. Many times that's going to stand in stark contrast to do no harm to my patient. And they're going to come to opposite ideals. In fact, in Colorado, if you were to become a physician, you would take the physician's oath. And this would be your code of ethics. And here I've just highlighted with the arrow, above all, I will strive to do no harm. And so my psychotherapist, she didn't want to tell the police that her patient revealed that there was a body in the backyard. Do no harm to my patient. That's my ethical duty. It would be unethical to destroy the patient-physician relationship by sharing that. And my criminal justice professionals are, but you could bring closure. You could solve the crime. You could stop the person from doing it again. You could help all of society. They immediately jump to a very different conclusion as to the ethics of that situation. Just an example for our medical folks, and I hope this comes out on Monday. Do no harm. Do no harm to who? To my patient. They're going to err on the side of their patient 9 times out of 10. And my criminal justice professionals are not. They're going to sacrifice that patient to solve the crime and protect you from further criminal activity. And so we sometimes see a little bit of this. Now, if you were to become a police officer here in Colorado Springs, as many of my students will, they aspire to become police officers. This is the ethical code. You can find it online for CSPD. And I just excerpt here, but my fundamental duty is to serve mankind, safeguard lives and property. And so my criminal justice folks, they're going to say they protect and serve. They protect the public from dangerous people. They protect property from being destroyed. Their number one goal is protect the public. Sometimes that's going to conflict with the doctor's goal of protecting her patient. Just a sort of a fundamentally different way of viewing things. And it really shows up when you sort of do a guided discussion with people, with law enforcement and medical. Both of them can look at the same situation and come to completely opposite conclusions about what's ethical. And it turns out to be quite a bit of fun. Let's see here. More examples here. Business ethics. And so we alluded to the Daniels Fund. And I think perhaps some of you are in the business school, right? Tracy, I know. And these are the Daniels Fund. And so it's also very interesting when I ask a business owner or I ask a business major, someone with an MBA, somebody running a large company, how would they resolve this situation? They're going to default to something similar to this: integrity, trust, accountability. Of course, my favorite, rule of law, down at the bottom, right? Viability. How can I get the best long-term value for all of the different stakeholders involved? That might be very different than from what the police officer believes is ethical, and very different than from what the doctor believes is ethical. And so what's really fun on Tuesday is I've got a doctor who owns a practice. And he will talk to you about how sometimes his own business ethics mix with his own medical ethics, and which one trumps. Because there could be something that's bad for business. A business professional might say that's unethical, but a healthcare professional would say, ooh, you got to do that. That is the only ethical decision. And so that'll be fun. That'll be really fun to discuss, I hope, in the roundtable. But I hope you're seeing, right, 3 different professions, 3 different models, 3 different things that are important to each professional. Just a favorite of mine. Some of you know, and we mentioned earlier, so I served in the Air Force, and for much of that time I was a prosecutor, prosecuted lots of different cases. And so lawyers have a code of ethics, so do judges, so do defense counsel, but there's a few special rules for prosecutors. Sometimes they drive folks bonkers, like this one at the bottom. As a prosecutor, I have an ethical duty to turn over exculpatory evidence to the defense counsel. So I might stumble upon a piece of evidence which suggests you didn't do it, but I know you did. I don't want to turn it over, but I have to. It is my ethical duty. If I come across evidence that shows your client didn't do it, I have to give it to you. And this sometimes is going to run counter to what my police officers are thinking. I just gave you this piece of evidence. Why did you go give it to the defense counsel? That makes no sense. That was unethical. But actually, it was ethical. I did the right thing by turning it over. And so prosecutors, defense, and judges all have their own ethical codes too. And sometimes they conflict. And so, my course, what I teach is Criminal Justice 4121. And oh man, I have not been tracking the comments very well, but I do see some great. Excellent point. All medical professionals do have a code, and sometimes that can be different. A DO versus an MD versus a nurse practitioner, but they do contain the same basic bioethical principles. One of my favorite things to do was sit on the bioethics committee at different hospitals. Love doing that and listening to how healthcare professionals resolve their ethical dilemmas. But yet, and I hope perhaps some of you out there are educators. I can see a few fellow folks at UCCS. I teach ethics in criminal justice. It's all about capital punishment, the death penalty, ethics for prosecutors. It's all about probation officers. What are their duties? What are their ethics when dealing with their clients? It's about shoot, no shoot. It's about no kidding criminal justice decisions and criminal justice ethics. And yet, the more I teach it, the more I find myself talking about medical ethics and DFEI principles. And so why, right? Why do you do that? Well, number one, it turns out students love it. A very effective way to engage them is to bring in a doctor or a nurse and talk about medical ethics. About the time there were two people bleeding out on the table and they had to decide which one to help. About the time they had one kidney and 10 people and they had to decide which one to give it to. About the time, and so this happened to me, young cancer patient. Mom wanted this experimental treatment, dad didn't. What do you do? How do you decide that? And the physician I've got coming has got tons and tons of just great ethical dilemmas, but students will love it. And what I love to do is try to apply criminal justice dilemma principles to a medical dilemma, or apply medical ethics to a criminal justice dilemma. And you'll see some really interesting results. For example, death penalty. What does a doctor say about that? What does a business leader say about that? What does a police officer say about that? My hypothesis is it's not all the same. They're going to have different conclusions. And so, students love guest speakers. Bring in a business leader, bring in a doctor, bring in a defense counsel. They love it. So, but another reason why is that I find in my ethics class, so criminal justice professionals, folks, they tend to be utilitarians, greatest good for the greatest number. A few of them are deontologists, categorical imperative. You have to figure out your duty and do that duty, whatever the consequences. A few of them are peacemakers. There's a few characterist ethicists. So what kind of person do I want to be? I shall be like Aristotle, a great, virtuous citizen. But you know what? Some students don't like any of them. None of them resonate at all. Out of the 5 classic models of CJ, none of them work. So then I get folks who are ethical relativists and they flip-flop. I get ethical nihilists who say ethics isn't even real. None of these things work. But yet, if I can expose them to some 5, 6, 7, 8 ethical approaches, maybe they'll find one that does resonate with them. And one of our course objectives in teaching ethics for criminal justice, one of the goals, I think the number 1 goal, is helping students develop their own code of ethics within professional and legal bounds. And so the more that they can draw from, the better. And some students just hear medical ethics and love it. Some students look at those principles of DFEI, integrity, build value, respect the law. That just becomes their code. They just adopt it. And I'm not an expert in all of these different codes, but the guest speakers are. And so it's just been a really effective, really fun way to learn by bringing in different perspectives and looking at an incident. Look at this use of force incident that this police tased this person. Was that ethical? And just hearing the different perspectives can really help students formulate their own perspective. I have had a lot of fun with it. On the practical side, wouldn't it be nice if our future police officers, prosecutors, Secret Service, a hearty number of our students join the military, but wouldn't it be nice if they understood the ethics that others are using in their professions? And a classic example, many of you have seen the viral video of the police officer who shows up at the hospital and he demands the records. And the nurse refuses to turn the records. And the police officer declares her to be unethical, and she declares him to be unethical, and it spirals into a very violent confrontation. Readily available on YouTube. I show it in my use of force class. But imagine if that police officer knew she's not being a jerk. She's not being obstinate. She's following her ethical approach. And wouldn't it be nice if the nurse knew that he wasn't just trying to invade patient privacy? He was trying to solve a crime in accordance with that person's ethical principles. And so, again, police officers are going to need to deal with so many different professionals. And you know what? When the police officer turns me something and I give it straight to defense counsel, they know I'm not trying to be a jerk or ruin their case. They know that's my ethical code. I've got to do that. They bring me a case, but I can't prove it. I can't charge it. It's not because I don't like them or I'm being mean. It's just my ethical code. If I don't believe there's probable cause to prove this crime, I cannot ethically do it. Even if you know the person did it, right? Because I can't prove it. I can't go ahead. And so if we just understood some of the ethical principles of fellow disciplines, what happens is you end up with creative third options, understanding, right? Perhaps in that case where the police officer shows up for the medical records, we wouldn't have escalated. Perhaps the police officer could have gone and got a search warrant. Perhaps the police officer could have said, hey, you know what? You don't give me the records, but that records custodian over there gives me the records. Perhaps you give me a redacted version of the records. All I need is this one little itsy bitsy blood alcohol level. And you can come to a creative third option that doesn't violate anyone's ethics. And students and practitioners have boundless creativity. And many times, if we just know where we're coming from, we can find that third option. You've complied with your ethics, not getting disbarred or losing your license. I've complied with my ethics, not losing my job or doing something I declare unethical. And so I have found in classes and these sorts of debates that we can work together, but we have to understand where each other is coming from, because an accountant's code is different from an engineer's code, which is different from many, many other. And even within medical, DOs and MDs have different medical codes. It's really interesting. There's slight differences, but as we pointed out in the comments, they're pretty similar, but there are indeed differences. So I think there's a lot of benefits. And so that led me to this. Here's my idea. Tuesday, we're gonna bring together a recent criminal justice major. She knows all about criminal justice ethics. She's been working at the DMV and has encountered ethical dilemmas already. Going to bring in a doctor with a host of stories. And I'm going to represent the business principles. But shameless plug, if you want to join in and you're over in the business school, I'm always looking for volunteers. So, and you can always just chime in on chats too. We're doing pretty good for time, so I'm just going to share with you a little bit about the dilemmas I selected. And we're going to see if our panelists come to different conclusions. These are all classic, they're riffs on classical interdisciplinary dilemmas. And so the burglar and the bullet. There's a burglary, and the homeowner wakes up in the middle of the night and shoots the burglar right in the leg. The burglar runs away, goes to the hospital. The police show up at the hospital and they want that bullet. Because if that bullet matches the weapon that was shot, very compelling case that burglar did it. But here's the thing. It's in such a spot that burglar can live the rest of their life with that bullet in their leg. And so the police believe that the only ethical thing to do is to sedate the patient, remove the bullet. Healthcare professionals often believe the only thing to do is let the patient go live their life. And of course, both sides will assert that the other side is unethical. Traditionally, and we'll see how this goes in our discussion. I don't know what the different approaches are going to say about this. I do see some comments here. Postmodern philosopher who describes a secular morality of mutual respect. Excellent. Yeah. Agree. And that might be similar to what we might call sort of peacemaking, and there's other terms for that too. But yes, Others might call that ethic of care, ethic of respect. So really good point. Thank you. Yeah, and there's so many different approaches. See if I could find a guest speaker to come in and talk about that. That would be wonderful. Another very classic dilemma is one heart, several recipients. And so I've just got a little scenario where there's a heart and a criminal is second in line. But of course, the criminal's victim is third in line. Who gets the heart? I make it a little harder. I make the victim an outstanding, upright, young citizen with a long life ahead. And I make the criminal a very evil person, older with less life ahead. And it's really interesting to see where the discussion goes. Some are going to say, well, the number two gets it. That's it. Others are going to say, well, you can't give it to a person with a shorter lifespan when there's a longer lifespan ahead. And again, I don't know with my panelists what they're going to say, what they're going to do with this. And the third dilemma is just a classic duty to report. Patient comes to the doctor's office. Patient gets diagnosed with, a seizure disorder. And the patient shouldn't be driving anymore. But the patient says, don't you dare tell anyone or I'll sue you and I'll make sure your business is ruined. And so does the doctor notify the DMV that this person shouldn't be driving? Does the doctor honor confidentiality and do no harm? What happens? And you've probably heard these dilemmas before. They're fairly classic. I've just changed the facts a little bit to make them more fun. And so that's what we're going to do. This is my project for my Ethics Fellow project. We're going to do this panel on the 9th. Perhaps you'll join us. Maybe it sounds interesting to you. Perhaps some of you out there are teaching business ethics. I know that on Tuesday, we're going to have some students from our medical school, our nursing school. Perhaps we'll have some instructors, and perhaps you might consider throwing in a little criminal justice ethics. What would a police officer do? What would a prosecutor do? Perhaps you think this whole idea is unwise in the first place, and that law enforcement needs to learn law enforcement ethics, and prosecutors need to learn prosecutors' ethics. Call it a day, because it just leads to confusion and no answers. And so, all right, we've gone for about 30 minutes here. And what I wanted to do is leave plenty of time for discussions. We've had great comments in here, but before I do that, I just want to thank you for tuning in on this beautiful Friday afternoon. I hope this was interesting to you, and I hope maybe you got some ideas for research, classroom, life. Just understanding each other's ethical approaches can lead to a lot of creativity and a lot of understanding. So at this point, perhaps, I think we go until 1 o'clock, but we'll go as long as you would like, or until we're cut off here by time. So is this a good time to do a little question and answer and idea sharing, Tracy?
Yes, and I put it in the chat that people can ask their questions in the chat, or go ahead and unmute and ask your question. Actually, or suggestions or ideas. We really would like to get some input on this concept, because I know that Dan has put a lot of effort into this. I'm gonna actually call on someone here as far as I'm gonna Scott, if you're still in here, you are in a position where you're at the Air Force Academy and you're also teaching business concepts, because a lot of your students go into working with defense contractors and other businesses. Would you like to share?
Yeah, Tracy, thanks. So I teach a business ethics course here, and interestingly enough, our business ethics course was initially developed as an interdisciplinary course between our management department and our philosophy department. And we have actually kind of traded back and forth who teaches that. And I think it's interesting to see how those perspectives mesh and how they can also be a little bit at odds. So when I took over teaching the course about 2 years ago, I felt like it had gone a little too far away from management principles and a little too much into a philosophical approach. And so they talked a lot about Aristotle and Socrates and all the great philosophers. And so we have since sort of migrated the course back a little bit more towards a practical application of ethics. So we actually use the Farrell's textbook, who used to be at UNM, now at Auburn. They have a textbook on business ethics that has a bunch of case studies in it. And so we have tried to make it a little more practically applicable, because I think those discussions, the philosophical discussions, are certainly useful, and wrestling with those big, ugly ideas can be useful. But at some point, we have to get back to the point of brass tacks of what do you do when you're faced with an ethical dilemma in a business or management situation. And so we've migrated a little bit back, the pendulum has swung a little bit back towards more of a business focus. But at the same time, we still do talk about the philosophical perspective. Now, listen to Dan talk, we could certainly include some more perspectives. And so that'll be something I have to give some thought to. The law department where Dan used to work is right next door to ours. So we might try to bring some of those concepts in as well. Just have to be careful to make sure we don't lose our focus by going in too many directions in one semester. So.
Yes, really excellent points. You do have to be careful not to lose your focus. And so I work hard. Our focus is ethics and criminal justice. And, I bring in a guest speaker for an hour or so now and then, but you're right. And it's got to be practical, and you got to watch for too many options, or they won't know what they're actually going to do. So that's a really great point to think about, keeping your focus on your focus, but intersprinkling a few ideas here and there for students to think about. Yeah, really good points. I do see a hand and I see a question.
Yeah, Dan, there's a good question from someone. I asked him if he wanted to show his video, and he said no. So the question is, does good action in an ethical system have both objective and subjective aspects? And could it be that good action under the same general ethical principles will result in different decisions because of different roles and competencies? Do we hope that all these different roles and competencies, though intention, will combine to make a better decisions and actions that any one individual would make? Great comment.
Yeah, that we could do a whole ethics course on those questions right there, right? Really good thinking and really good question. Does an ethical system have both objective and subjective? I think they do, because even in utilitarianism, I do the most good for the most people. I have to define good. What's good? Is putting someone in jail good? And good for who, right? And we've got to think about short-term good and long-term good. And so yes, your definition of a good result for the most people could differ from mine. In deontology, we have to do our duty, right? We have to identify what is our duty. Consequences don't even matter. What is our duty? Is our duty to protect and serve? Is it to protect the patient? Is it to not lie? Is it to protect trade secrets? Is it to? And you'll see this a lot in Greek ethics too. I need to be a virtuous person. Well, what would a virtuous person do? And so, of course, the classic is Socrates, right? Was put to death for corrupting the youth, had chances to escape. Many folks believe that the death penalty to be immoral, and he should have resisted, but he didn't. He didn't escape. He said it's his duty to take the punishment for his own crime. He did it. He drank the hemlock. Other people say that's not what a virtuous person does. A virtuous person fights and resists and does these things. And so we can certainly have subjectively different, they have both objective and subjective components. Really good.
I have
Could
a
it be
question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, this is Tracy. I really enjoyed your presentation and your ideas and your discussions about how the students have been responding to this question. How would you explain or describe if the students, what did they think about what was ethical when before they started the class or at the beginning of the class, and what did they think about it at the end? Because your idea is that you're trying to bring them to a position where they're able to explore their own ethics and how it fits within these professions. Do you feel that you were able to meet that objective, or did you just muddy them up? So that now they have no clue about what is ethical because they say that it all depends and it's relative.
Yeah.
Could you explain that a little bit?
So it goes like this: crystal clear, muddy, clear again. And so what I do on day one, I put up 3 scenarios: torture the terrorist to save the people, watch your partner put a dent in somebody else's car and drive away, go to the coffee shop and get a free cup of coffee. So I've got a dramatic example down to a little itsy bitsy example. And they all have, and I say, write down your instinctive gut reaction. So I would never torture the terrorist. I would never rat out my partner, and I would never take a free cup of coffee. Then we unpack those for the whole rest of the class, and we come back to them at the end. And we say, if anyone changed their mind and why? And it's really interesting. Many of them have strong gut reactions. I could say capital punishment, ethical or not. Never ethical. But why do I say that? I haven't thought about why I say that. I haven't worked through my reasoning. And so I think they come in with very firm ethical convictions. I'm never torturing anybody. Then they unpack that. And a good number of them reaffirm their initial gut reactions based on our principles. Some of them change their mind, and it's great. And I do make them draft their own ethical code that they can carry around in their pocket. So I very much try to muddy the waters, but then at the end, I really try to do practical things to bring it together for them. And you know what? I get emails from students that say, hey, this happened to me, just like you said it would. And this is what I did, just like I said I would. And it's really fun. So I try to do this sort of arc. But I see a hand out there, Deb.
Yeah, I was. Thank you for the presentation. It was really good, and it's always good to get different professional perspectives on ethics. As you were talking about your classic dilemmas, I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun to add a twist?
Yes.
by putting one of the for the heart one,
Mhm.
one of the people either in a coma or incapacitated in some way so they can't make decisions, and then bringing in the use of surrogacy where maybe family even disagrees.
Absolutely. Now you're into exam questions or research papers. But yes, that's a really good idea. And we can make really cool permutations to challenge them. And you're right. And this is what I hope will happen. I hope somebody in the crowd asks that question. What if the number 1 person on the list is in a coma? They could come out of the coma. They could never come out of the coma. Does that mean they get the heart or not? Or should it just go to number 2? And so I'm hoping somebody out there sort of flips that up on my doctor and on my CJ grad, and makes it even more difficult. And we can make it even more difficult where you make the, like the number 2 person is the victim of the number 1 person. So this is just another great ethical dilemma where you've got perhaps a terrorist or a criminal who has shot somebody, and then they've gotten injured, and both roll into the ER at the same time. Do you treat the victim or the criminal first? Most doctors are going to say you treat them in order of medical severity. most police officers are going to say, you got to treat the victim of the crime first. And it's really fun little riff on that idea as well. So thank you. I hadn't thought about that coma situation and inserting a surrogate type of decision maker. That would be fun. You just wrote a new final exam question there for me though. And just to get back to the question in the chat, could it be that good action under the same principles will result in different decisions? I think so. But also interestingly, I think sometimes, even though we have different ethical codes, we arrive at the same ethical decision. And so I do hope the speakers sometimes agree. Hey, I'm a utilitarian. This is what I'm going to do. Hey, I'm a medical ethicist. I'm doing the same thing, just for different reasons. This is how I got there. This is how you got there. And let me just get to the final. Do we hope that all these different roles combine to make better decisions than any one individual? Absolutely. And that's why in hospitals, we have ethics committees. And so, I've got a situation where mom wants an experimental surgery for the child, but dad doesn't. The doctor doesn't know what to do. Well, we've got a mechanism for that, an ethics committee. And we bring in a patient advocate, we bring in a doctor, a nurse, a layperson, a community rep, a lawyer. We bring in all different people and we try to make the best recommendation we can. And you can do this as a police officer too. This happened. I've got 10 minutes to think about it. What should I do? And we can convene a meeting and bring in different perspectives and try to come to a consensus. Now, sometimes we can't, and you've just got to make that decision. And sometimes there's not time. But when you see organizations with ethics committees, that's what we're trying to do. In the military, from my military friends, you can go consult a designated agency ethics official, and maybe they can write you a nice opinion about your different options and what the law says and what ethics says. So absolutely, I think bringing in, and what's really cool is oftentimes they'll come up with a third option that you never thought of. Any other ideas, thoughts?
Scott raised his hand if he has an.
Oh, sure. Yes.
All right, I'll kind of try to turn towards my computer here. So I was just thinking that, a lot of times the situations, there's not a lot of situations I wouldn't expect where you don't have the time to consult someone. And so building a network of people that you can bounce ideas off of, whether it's peers or superiors, is a really important idea for ethical decision making, I think. And so that's something that I would, we talk a lot in our class about that with our students, is building that support network and trying to have somebody that can help you make an effective decision or give you some advice.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, to get help, right? You can always ask for help, ask for guidance. And what you'll find is people think of things you hadn't thought about. There's a consequence you hadn't thought about. There's a third option you hadn't thought about. There's a law you hadn't thought about. And folks can really help to point you in the right direction with those types of questions. So great. And I always remind my ethics students that they should really exchange some emails and some phone numbers, because they're going to be working together in the police department, in the FBI. Some of them will go to law school. They're going to run into each other again and again. And to have that kind of network, hey, has this ever happened to you? And what'd you do about it? Really effective. Oh, and I see a great link. And what does that link go to?
Okay, I sent it to everybody. I just wanted to share that the use of the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative principles has expanded beyond education in high school or higher education colleges and high schools, but they have a big program that they had initiated with law enforcement because of some of the issues with the police. And so I did give the link. They don't have a lot of information about it because it was a pilot program, and Colorado Springs police units were involved of how to try to use the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative principles to answer or make that connection that you have identified, as these, as they deal through their own code of ethics, and then how the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative principles can help them kind of decide what's the right thing to do.
I see a hand.
Yeah, Bruce again here, this time in sound. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your presentation and your enthusiasm and happiness there. I was intrigued by your example. It seems like the example of Socrates probably has, but been a case study for many people. But one issue there that I was intrigued by is also the whole issue of the individual versus the whole. The Greeks had this the one and the many intention, or trying to think that out. And I think about Socrates' statement, as I recall it, of why he wouldn't escape. And he was almost encouraged, I understand, by the state to go ahead and run away, and exile himself. But this idea that, well, I've lived under this system of justice and benefited for all my life, and when the pinch comes, I bail, that would be unethical. But that kind of perspective is not in the moment, and it plays against the big picture and me, and that's hard, isn't it? I just wondered if you comments on teaching ethics. How we all could learn better to reflect on the whole in a situation, as well as our own role, and how our ox is going to get gored versus down the road somewhere something bad's going to happen because we did this convenient thing.
Yeah,
that's
wow.
Tough.
No, that's a really great point. And what you saw there was someone worried about the system as a whole and respect for the system as a whole. And as you said, if I run away now, what will that do to the system as a whole? Will it undermine it? Will it damage it? Will it encourage others to do the same? And as you said, I've lived and benefited from the system. I can't just now that doesn't suit me. And that sort of is that deontology perspective, that deontology is all about doing your duties and thinking, what if everyone did this? And so, like Immanuel Kant would say, don't do it unless you would be okay if every single other human being did the same thing. And if you can't universalize your action, then don't do it. It's unethical. And so I think you're really sort of into universality there. Of course, do unto others. Another way, how would I like it if he was a convicted criminal, how would you like it if other convicted criminals just ran away when it didn't suit them, right? And so really, really amazing points, which also leads me to another really interesting point, civil disobedience. And so I have my students read two short articles. One is Martin Luther King's Letters from a Birmingham Jail, and another is a letter by President Lincoln. And President Lincoln says, hey, when laws don't go your way, you got to work within the system to change them. And Dr. King says, when laws are unjust and unfair, it's no law and you got to disobey it. And so President Lincoln would say, well, that's unethical. You got to follow the law and then get the law changed. But Dr. King wrote a great rebuttal that said, you don't understand my circumstances, they're different. And the only ethical thing for me to do is to disobey this law. And so I have the students wrestle around with that too, these two competing perspectives, which you bring up there too, right? Does Socrates have a duty to obey the law or to change the law if that's an unjust law? But that's a whole class right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Really?
Well, and then the issue of, should we only obey a perfect system? in which case we will never obey.
Excellent.
It's a
Excellent.
difficulty, right? I don't know whether Socrates believed in capital punishment or not, and I suspect from reading that maybe that didn't even matter, right? That again, back to he lived under this system, these were
Right.
laws, and he was a citizen, so that he had benefited from some things. And I mean, of course, he had an individual perspective that nobody could do harm to him except himself. So that, that's another issue, right? That
Absolutely. Really great question.
Really good to talk more about these things.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And it looks like I'm getting the time. Our time's almost up. So, Tracy, should I turn it back to you for any concluding thoughts or ideas?
Sure. I want to thank everybody, and I'm actually want to encourage you, if you have some more questions, that you can always contact Dan or myself for more information. And I do want to thank everybody for their great insights and a really exploring an idea that really brought up a lot of questions and a lot of good ideas for all of us in teaching our classes. So I'm going to thank you again, and the video recording of this will be available, and all registered participants will get it in an email, but it will also be available on our YouTube channel under the Roundtables, Ethics Roundtables. So thank you very much, and I want to encourage all of you to enjoy the rest of your day.